Yes! Welcome. That's right. Week 1, post-flight. Back in the saddle. Thanks for rolling with us here on Philly Voice Sports on the Philly Voice YouTube page. We appreciate that. Hit the thumbs up button if you haven't. Subscribe here. A lot of content, including the Philly Voice Bet Show, which I'm sure the Philly Voice Sports Bet Show will be covering the Philadelphia Eagles from a betting standpoint this season. Look, here, you know what we do. We look back at the week, the game that was. We look ahead at the end, and in between, we give you some analysis, some guests, some smart people, way smarter than me, that will join us. So let's start with the win. Let's start with the victory. Let's start with the fact that the Eagles on offense were able to do whatever they wanted, even if it meant running the football. And I think the biggest issue or the biggest negative or the biggest pause when you look at the offense was, well, why wasn't Jalen Hurts throwing the football more? I had no problem with the offense. I had absolutely zero problem with the offense as far as the game plan right through execution. The only issue I really had with the offense was the offensive line. That was the problem, and especially early on where it looked like those guys were still on the plane. So the difference of figuring it out versus not, I think, was the difference between the offense and the defense. Let's just start with Jalen Hurts. Let's start with the offense. The fact that they win, tight one. Hopefully you didn't bet that on the Eagles side by any means. Doesn't mean that you should have bet the Lions. Just meant that it was a pass. Here's the thing. When you look at Detroit, that defense, or even their team as a whole, they're not as bad as 44-6, but they're also not that much better. And there is a clear-cut pathway to success against Detroit, which means running, which means establishing physical dominance. Again, it took a little bit because the offensive line was late to the party, but how can you not be happy? How can you not look at what you saw across the board? Stats, A.J. Brown, his debut, Jalen Hurts, not turning it over in the air like that. Many people thought multiple picks were coming. The issues were what? That he didn't throw the football, and that A.J. Brown, I saw that A.J. Brown got too much, like they didn't spread it out. Don't nitpick. Don't look at anything negative that happens from this game outside of the positive, which is you get a win on the road. It's difficult. As you saw, they couldn't even cover a 3.5-point spread against Detroit. It's difficult to win games on the road in the NFL. I don't care who you're playing, and I don't care what their record is. It's still a football game on the road in the top league in the world. So it's not easy by any means. I thought Nick Sirianni, Jalen Hurts, A.J. Brown, Devontae Smith, everybody, including the offensive line at some point, they all kept their composure. And that's huge. You have to feel great about the fact that the Eagles start off 1-0. The Giants have this false sense of confidence. They think they're a good football team after beating Tennessee. Yeah, they shocked the world and all. Let's see you do it a couple of times in a row. Washington, man, we all know about fool's gold. That is both Ron Rivera and Carson Wentz. So right now with Dallas dealing with Dak, the Eagles are in a great spot. You should feel absolutely wonderful about a victory. So the Birds open up 1-0. Jalen Hurts was fantastic, and the offense was able to move the football. Let the game come to you. All right, that's the biggest takeaway for me, was let the game come to you. You know, don't force things. Don't force throws. Don't force these issues. Don't look at this and think, oh, man, he's not making enough throws. He's not. You want it to be a situation where Joe Flacco throws the ball 50 times? Jalen Hurts isn't built. He shouldn't be throwing the ball 30-plus times. Pick your spots. I thought the maturity and the growth was about he as a player. And on the field, we saw him not make stupid decisions. We saw him not rush or force throws. That is the honest interpretation, for me at least, of growth when you talk about that. Now, I mentioned that was my biggest takeaway on offense. It's a little different when you start to add and factor in the defense. And I don't really know where or who to start with outside of Jonathan Gannon, but the biggest number one takeaway for me beyond, and that's why I led with Jalen Hurts and Nick Sirianni and the offense, because everybody wants to see this step and this growth. I thought you saw tangible growth and maturity from Jalen Hurts. That's not the biggest takeaway. First, number one takeaway here is simple. Jonathan Gannon was ill-prepared. Jonathan Gannon was not prepared for this game. He wasn't prepared for Swift, for Goff. He wasn't prepared for Hawkinson. What did he say? Hawk? He wasn't prepared for him? Nothing. In fact, it was painfully obvious that Jonathan Gannon thought, if I just apply pressure on Jared Goff, if I just call for a blitz, these guys on the field will figure it out. I'm not even being hyperbolic to the sense of like, oh, you don't believe that, Shander. I think to an extent, there is a loose game plan that was established to where he was just nudging guys in a position. And from there, it was just left up for, hey, you're just a better football player than the guy going up against you, than the guy trying to block you, than the guy trying to juke you, than the guy trying to break you off on a route. You're just a better football player. So I'm going to trust that. That level of absurdity. I mean, it's like he's coaching with his eyes closed, right? That level of absurdity is maddening to see. Just absolutely maddening. And it's not right, it's not fair to continue to have your team bail you out. And that's essentially what he did. He had his guys bail him out. And that was a concern that we saw last year as well. It was similar to what we had with our concerns with Jonathan Gannon. Was like, yo, man, what's going on? And it didn't look like he improved at all. It didn't look like Jonathan Gannon had any true improvement from game plan. Sorry about that. Any true improvement from game plan from last year to this year. And that's not acceptable, because we can't sit there and expect growth and maturity from Jalen Hurts, who had a lot of tools given to him, and not Jonathan Gannon. I thought the offensive line, the second takeaway, the offensive line. I thought the offensive line initially didn't show up. It was painfully obvious that they were just late to the party, as I mentioned, that they thought they can dilly-dally and tag along and then ultimately catch up. Well, they did. It was against Detroit. They did. Normally, if Gannon's defense plays somewhat better, that score looks a lot better, and that offensive line play as a whole looks a lot better. But this was a situation, unfortunately, for the Philadelphia Eagles where they can't afford to have of all units, they cannot afford to have the offensive line play slow to the party. They can't have them play sluggish. They can't have them just not take advantage of weaker defensive fronts. And that's going to kill drives, as we saw right away in the first. That's going to kill a lot. So you have to recognize that the second takeaway has a lot to do with catching up. And the offensive line gets points taken away. They took 2 steps back to take maybe 3 steps forward. Because at the end of the night, you look and see Miles Sanders, Jalen Hurts, guys were getting open on the ground through holes that were created by the offensive line. Can't scoff at the fact that the offensive line played awful the entire game, because they did not, and that's unfair. So the second takeaway is the offensive line. Third is that they get a win. Whoa, what do you mean? You got to give me a little more. You get a win against a situation that was calling for you from a betting standpoint for the Lions to keep this thing close. Every single metric and trend pointed to the Lions. I'll spare you the long list, but everything pointed to the Detroit Lions ultimately, and I think this is what played out. The variable is how it plays out, keeping it close. Even right down to teams who get embarrassed to the tune of more than 4 scores or 5 scores, whatever the margin of victory is, coming back and being like 70% ATS in a revenge game the next year. So ATS against the spread for non-bettors was 3.5 for the most part in the last week or so. That means that the Lions, to beat that spread, would have to keep it to 3 points. They did. They kept it to 3 points. I told you that on Friday on Fox 29. It was going to be a 3-point margin of victory. The reason is because it's just tough to get one out on the road. And don't expect the Philadelphia Eagles to take advantage of bad teams and win every single road game. Because winning on the road takes a lot more than game plan. It takes a lot more than composure. It takes a lot more than relying on A.J. Brown. My goodness, fantastic. But A.J. also factors into this third takeaway, which is you had a monster. You have a workhorse. You have a bell cow receiver. You have a true T.O.-esque number one that you can pelt and pepper to the days in which it's done and truly ensure that you're going to be in games. Because wait. And this is what I love about getting this victory on the road and putting up a lot of points and having this offense and the defense with the pick six, but having this offense now start to fine tune is A.J. Brown, put two guys, shade him. I love it. Let's open things up for Dallas Goedert. Let's open things up for Devontae Smith. Let's open things up for a guy in the passing game. If it's Kenny Gainwell, maybe not Miles Sanders, but let's open that up. Quez Watkins deep. Let's see how that truly plays out. That's the biggest takeaway that I can say as far as just getting the win, baby, because that's the biggest key that you can always apply on a road victory in the NFL is you got to win. And you hate to hear that. Well, a win is a win. No. When you're on the road, I don't care if it's the playoffs. Playoffs, yeah, when it's the playoffs. When you're on the road, you do anything and everything possible to win a football game. There's no such thing as a style point in the NFL. There just isn't. So we want you now to be happy about what you saw. We'll look ahead to Minnesota and we'll see how that works. But, we want you to be happy more so than anything else here. That's the biggest part, is to be recognizing at least there is an opportunity for this team to truly now take advantage of moving forward, of not just beating Minnesota, but moving forward now and winning the division. Watch out, man. I mean, who else? Who else would it be? Right? Washington? Nah. The Giants? Look, I'll give you credit if you come with the Washington Commanders because at least they have some stability now, you would think, although we know better at quarterback. Daniel Jones is Daniel Jones. That ain't changing, right? He's not changing the stripes on his coat. Brian Daboll doesn't do that immediately. He doesn't just step in and do that. So is it Dallas? I mean, this division is pretty much hand-given, you would think. All right, let's bring in Jimmy Kempsky there, covering the world, of course, for the Philadelphia Eagles. I have to put the headphones on so I can hear him. You look so comfortable and relaxed, Jimmy, following a nice trip to Detroit.
Yeah, well, I went to bed at like 12:30 last night, got up at like 3:30 so that I could make my 6 o'clock flight, and then I got home and just passed the hell out. So I'm up, and I'm a little fresher than I was before.
All right. Well, you look it, man. If you told me that you got 14 hours of sleep and you were on a beach the last day, I'd believe that too.
That sounds totally unbelievable to me, but thank you. Appreciate it.
All right. So real quick, there's a lot to talk about in the limited time that we have. It felt like the offensive line in the first couple of maybe quarter and a half was late to the party, fresh off of a beach. What happened, in your opinion, as far as really the only thing that took a little, it picked up, but took a little bit to slow start? Everything else on the offense looked to be clicking.
Yeah, I got to go back and take a look at that. I hadn't. I know the Lions brought a lot of pressure early in the game, and that certainly had something to do with it. The Eagles struggled picking up blitzes and whatnot, and that's difficult to do week one when you don't have tape on opposing defenses. So you don't know what you're necessarily going to get oftentimes early in the season in these games. So that probably has something to do with it. But again, I got to go back and actually take a closer look at how bad it was, who was responsible, what scheme adjustments need to be made and such. But you're right. I think that once they kind of got their sea legs, so to speak, things calmed down and they played better.
And looking at, I think the biggest topic of conversation that I heard, we use all the wrong barometers, right? Social media, the radio, like the worst that you can for human behavior. But it's us, it's Philly. That's what we do, right? There was concern that Jalen Hurts wasn't making enough throws or making the throws outside of one big one, of course, to A.J. Brown, maybe another one that we can point to. My response to that, and I don't know where you stand on this side, I'm sure there's going to be a ton of middle ground, and rightfully so, but my response to that is the tangible maturity that I think we saw against Detroit was not forcing throws, running around like a Justin Fields or a new guy to the league, but understanding that you can tuck it and move the ball, especially take advantage of a weakness. So, yeah, I think we all would like to see maybe a couple of more big throws downfield, but at the same time, is that not part of the maturity process, knowing when to not force a throw as much as it is to tuck it?
I mean, big picture, ultimately, I just look at what they did, and they put 31 points on the board. I mean, the team put 38 points on the board. Jalen Hurts led the offense to 31 points yesterday. So it's not bad for week one. And he didn't make any major mistakes. He didn't throw the ball to the other team. He didn't fumble. He didn't come close to doing any of those things. And he made enough plays with his arm, the AJ Brown throw that you cited. Made plenty of plays with his feet, obviously. And, would you like to have a quarterback who can read defenses and get the ball out as quickly as Tom Brady, and then also run around the same way that like a Lamar Jackson can, and can throw the ball 70 yards down the field like a Justin Herbert? You can combine all three of those guys into one super quarterback. Yeah, of course, we'd love to do that, but that's not what he is. It's like, I think that sometimes we ask a little too much of these players. And what he is a player who, if he can make good decisions, not give the ball away to the other team, make enough plays with his arm and his legs to put the team in a good enough position to win. They have the roster around him, both offensively and defensively, to win a lot of games this year. So, I was more encouraged than discouraged from that game yesterday, because I thought that with the plays that he did make, he was responsible in many ways for their win yesterday. So for me, it was a stock up game for Jalen Hurts.
Is there anything, just a quick one here, because I wanted to end on the defense, and we can spend a second or two on that by all means, but is there anything with the offense, maybe the offensive line, as we mentioned, and I'm not fishing for a negative, so if there is an answer to the no, is there anything that you saw that you thought, yeah, maybe I expected more, or wow, I'm surprised that didn't work? Because to your point, they put up 31. It didn't feel like that kind of game, but I just wanted to ask in case we missed something.
Yeah, I mean, you can go back and just doing snap counts, for example, after the game. I saw that Devontae Smith led the wide receivers in time on the field, and he didn't have any catches yesterday. He had 4 targets, no catches. Quez Watkins didn't get targeted at all, no catches. He had 40, 50 snaps, something like that. So, I mean, the ball was going heavily, of course, to AJ Brown, who had 13 targets and he had 10 catches for 150 something yards. And why not? Because it was working. Right. So if he's the hot hand and it's working, and he's making plays in the football and breaking tackles after the catch, by all means, go win the game. But I think going forward, they're going to want to get guys like Quez and more importantly Devontae more involved in the offense. Defensively, I was really surprised by how little Jordan Davis played, especially with how effective he was when he played. I mean, again, I got to go back and watch it, so I probably shouldn't speak that confidently about how well he played. But it seemed to me, watching the game live, that he played well. But not only that, but also he was getting gashed defensively. Yeah. The Lions really had a good game plan in their rushing attack, and I feel like it's not so much that they were able to run the ball in the Eagles because they were just physically outmatching them. It was more scheme related in what they were doing to the Eagles in the run game, and that's something that they're going to have to clean up before week 2, when you have Minnesota coming in here with Dalvin Cook, and then of course all the other weapons in their offense like Kirk Cousins and Justin Jefferson, of course, and Adam Thielen. So yeah, bigger. They have a much more talented opponent offensively anyway coming in week 2 than they did here week 1 in Detroit.
All right, let's wind down with this, Jimmy. At Jimmy Kempski, of course, on Twitter. Everything that you need to know, you already know. I mean, I'm on Philly Voice. I feel like it's redundant to remind people that you are the world here for the Philadelphia Eagles, but we will. So let's wind down with this. Why did it look like, from literally hundreds of miles away here in Philadelphia, that Jonathan Gannon showed up and was basically like, all right, guys, it's Detroit. Just go do what you want to do. Now, I understand he blitzed, he applied pressure, but just applying pressure versus a schematic pressure that maybe works, it just seemed like, and again, I don't want to minimize it, but man, Jimmy, it seemed like there wasn't much, or he simply was, to your point about the scheme that the Lions were running, vastly outcoached.
Yeah, I thought the scheme issues were more in the run game than they were in the pass game, because again, the Eagles were just getting gashed. I mean, they gave, I don't know what the number was, but it was close to 200 yards on the ground that they gave up on Sunday, right? So, they really struggled with that, and seem like, and it was late in the game that the Lions were still running. Lions were down. Lions were down like 17, and they're still running the ball because it was working so well. Right. So like, the Eagles Eagles maybe more specifically Jonathan Gannon, didn't make maybe necessary adjustments that need to be made. So yeah, it'll be interesting to see like what changes they make with Minnesota coming into here week 2. Again, I got to go back and look at all of it to see, get a better idea on watching all 22 and whatnot of what actually went down on Sunday. But yeah, it's certainly while the offense put up 31 points and the defense gave them a defensive touchdown, then there are certain players maybe to highlight who played well defensively. But I thought, just generally speaking, you give up 35 points to this, and it's a young, scrappy team, but you look at their actual personnel, it's not a great roster, and the quarterback's Jared Goff. Could have been worse if Goff had hit some pretty wide open receivers that he missed on. They could have put more points on the board than they did, and this outcome could have been potentially different. So it is concerning. I mean, my biggest concern heading into the season wasn't so much Jalen Hurts. He was, one of the top 2, of course, but it wasn't so much Jalen Hurts as it was Jonathan Gannon. And was he going to be able to take all these, new talented players that Howie Roseman added, like Kaiser White and James Bradbury and Chauncey Gardner-Johnson now, and then of course, the draft picks and Jordan Davis and Nakobe Dean, and then of course Hassan Reddick was a primary target on day 1 of free agency. You get all these new guys, they can all play, but how is it all going to mesh together? And would Jonathan Gannon be able to maximize their effectiveness? I mean, you have Hassan Reddick and Josh Sweat dropping in the coverage, playing the flats, and more than I would ever expect guys who rush the passer as well as they do to have to drop into coverage. So that's a concern of mine heading forward, and really nothing calmed my concerns heading into this season that Jonathan Gannon is the right guy to sort of lead this defense.
Wow. We'll end on that note, because I think you speak for a lot of people watching this team right now, especially with hope and expectation that not only Jalen Hurts improves and takes whatever step that is, but the team, and it doesn't hurt the team as well on D. Awesome, Jimmy. Thank you so much, brother.
All right, Eytan. Take care.
All right, that's Jimmy Kempsky at Jimmy Kempsky on Twitter, following, of course, and everything going on here with the Philadelphia Eagles. You should be. All right, let's look ahead to Minnesota, right? Why not? As we get out of here, and I don't need these anymore, because I don't need to hear Jimmy. He's off. Let's look at the Vikings, Justin Jefferson. That's it. That's it. That's the only thing you have to worry about first and foremost. You get by Justin Jefferson, then you can start talking about the Philadelphia Eagles winning the game. I'll save my betting advice for the Philly Voice Sports Bet Show. Myself, Devin Caney, Harry Mays, Monday, Wednesday, Friday, early afternoon, the drop. But in the case of just the Vikings, Kirk Cousins has his issues, his ghost needs to exercise and all that in prime time. It's mitigated or balanced by the fact that Justin Jefferson is a specimen in the NFL. And on top of that, you've got Adam Thielen, who is now going to be, until Devontae Smith catches a football, or at least gets thrown a good football to catch, what have you, Adam Thielen this year is going to be a really solid number 2, because he's not really a number 2, but he's not a number 1 like Justin Jefferson, and he's going to continue to take advantage of it. It wasn't a great debut, but I think the Packers recognized that they could really only do one thing and stop everybody else but Jefferson. And on top of that, you have Dalvin Cook on the ground, and it is inexcusable for Jonathan Gannon to not have a better game plan against Cook than he did against Swift and the Detroit Lions. Here's the good news. As of now, from what we've seen last year, both in the air with A.J. Brown this year and last year on the ground, the Philadelphia Eagles have an offense that should contend with anybody. They have an offense that should be able to put up points against anybody. You have a solid special teams unit. You get a return. You get a defensive turnover, what have you. Anything to help the offense. It doesn't matter how it comes. I wouldn't be surprised if you did see a little bit more passing against the Vikings, not just because the Eagles would be down. So look at the Vikings, understand that game against the Packers is probably a really good representation of who they are as a team, going up against a divisional foe, a coach who knows them, not having to pull stuff out that they're only going to use once or maybe twice a year. That's who the Vikings are. Kirk Cousins is going to do everything possible to get to Justin Jefferson, and the Eagles I'm not even talking about Jalen Hurts until the game. The big thing needs to be cleaned up, as you heard from Jimmy, is defense and getting to the quarterback with the right scheme, not just applying pressure, the right scheme to get there. Look, hit the thumbs up button, subscribe here to the Philly Voice channel across the board. A lot of content here on a daily basis. We appreciate you. We'll be okay against the Vikings. It'll be tough. It'll be okay against the Vikings. I'm Eytan Shander. Go Birds.